So then what happens is that women who are desiring leadership and the masculine and not toxic masculinity, a wonderful, beautiful masculine expression of the Father, of God, to be present in their home, to lead spiritually, to lead relationally, to lead from a provision and a protection standpoint, right? All the things. Because there's a vacuum, there has been a vacuum there.
Welcome to Authentic Conversations. I'm your host, Ryan James Miller, and I believe the way to freedom, fulfillment, and success ultimately comes by living as the most authentic version of yourself. If you're ready to live the life you've dreamed of, you're in the right place. All right, what up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Authentic Conversations. I'm just going to get this out of the way right out of the gate. I'm a little sniffly. I'm a little nasally because at the time of recording, I am about a week out of COVID, just a little bit longer than that, I guess. And I'm great. Things are good. You've probably seen it. You probably heard it on social media somewhere. So thank God for that. I'm definitely praising God for mild symptoms and quick recovery, and I'm back to doing life. And part of doing life is getting to jump into the conversations that I've been having throughout this season. We have been predominantly talking with other men about what it means to be men. And this particular guy, JD Crouse, I met him in Tennessee, of all places. I don't live there, though I do love that. Love Tennessee, Nashville particularly. I say it's the best city in the entire country, in my opinion. JD and I are in a mastermind, Christian businessmen that are really focused on becoming the best men we can be in our professional lives, personal lives, spiritual lives, financially. And so we got together a couple of months back and we just dug into what that meant. And I got to meet JD. We had a really good but quick conversation. I thought, man, he'd be really good to have on the podcast. So here he is. This is the first time that we're talking since then. And so you are going to be under the gun, buddy, but thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, Ryan. It's good to get to meet you in Nashville, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to have this conversation. You hit a very tender spot for me. It's near and dear to my heart. So
that's good, man. Fun. And if you're watching, you just know how cool he is because he's got a big American flag in the background. And so you just know he's a cool dude right out of the gate. All right. So I've been trying to preface most of our conversations with this. And so there's a lot of discussion or talk around manhood and what it means to be a man. And so I'm always interested to hear people's perspective on that or definition of that. So for you, JD, if someone was to say, or if I'm to say right now, like, what does it mean to you to be a man? What kind of comes to mind? How do you define that? How do you articulate that for people?
Well, I think for me, I have to go all the way back to the beginning. And when God created man, he and woman, he created us in his image and likeness. And so we are the imago Dei. We're the image and likeness of our creator. He happened to have created the heavens and the earth. Like, he created everything. That's the worldview that I subscribe to. That's my point of view. And so with that, though, there were a lot of years. I didn't come into a relationship with Jesus until I was 25. I didn't grow up in the church. And I got saved at an Amway convention. It was a real deal in Fort Worth, Texas. It's kind of a crazy story. A lot of people get a kick out of that, but
I know, you know what? I don't normally do this because I haven't heard the rest of you explain that. Well, we just have to pause. Like, I have to hear how in the heck.
Yeah. Right.
We got to hear that. What happened?
Yeah. So, a buddy of mine had been, drawing the circles and pursuing the Amway dream. And he talked me into going to a Amway convention in Fort Worth. And the God side of the story was that there was a leader, a successful guy. He was also, I think he was head. He had like 2,000 people underneath of him, whatever his title was, COO or something, of a big hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas. I lived in Oklahoma at the time. And he had been dripping on me. The Lord, he was a believer, and the Lord had been working on me through him. And to the credit of the leaders, the guys that were really making the money, I never made a nickel in Amway. They always on Sundays, I guess, it became, it was part of their culture. They had a church service, and they had a guy present the gospel, and they had worship and a whole enchilada. And the Lord just tugged on my heart, and I went forward, and man, it was a real deal. But you don't hear that very much, right?
I love that because, I have myself, maybe more often than I should, poked fun at MLMs. But in this case, dude, it worked.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's the very best thing that ever happened to me. And
that's so good.
Yeah. So, anyway, I stumbled around there. I'll just fast forward through my testimony just a little bit, but I stumbled around, didn't really get plugged in anywhere, didn't get discipled. And I was trying to read my Bible, and I was honestly living pretty much like a hellion, like not a lot had changed. And, one night I just prayed, and I said, Lord, I need you to please send me a godly woman. I don't know if I can do this on my own. I don't think I can. And 30 days later, I met my wife, and we were married a year and a half later. And there's lots of really cool things. She's the second best thing that ever happened to me. And so her dad was like a spiritual father to me, just a wonderful example of what it means to walk with the Lord and serve and all that. And I don't really know where I was going with all of this, but I think I do. For 15 years as a believer, I was frustrated. I was just in church. I was plugged in. I was in men's groups. I was a youth pastor for a while, and I was very involved. But I was just I always kind of felt like a fish out of water. And for me, about 6 years ago, so this gets back to what is man. For me, the mystery of the kingdom of heaven got unlocked in my spirit about 6-7 years ago. And I used to believe, as a believer, that the earth is basically going to hell in a handbasket, and that we're to just wait for the sweet by and by, to wait for the second coming of Christ, which is true. And I do anticipate his coming. And I pray that I'm ready, but it changed for me 6 or 7 years ago. I need to get that date but it was generally in that time frame that I began to understand that I was a saint, and that I was an heir to the kingdom of heaven, just like you. That God first loved us before there was sin in the earth, and Jesus redeemed us back into that Adamic covenant. And I'm going right into it, but for me, who is man? Okay, we have been given dominion over the earth. Okay, to steward it over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and everything that crawls and walks on the earth, right? And it's a beautiful, redeeming, hope-filled commandment or invitation to be given that. And so many of us, me included, for a really, really long time, have walked around just neutered, emasculated, in an effeminate environment in the church, outside of the church, where we don't walk in that knowledge, that knowing, not only knowing here, but putting on the robe of righteousness. And so what is man? It's one of my most favorite topics, because God has just done a redeeming work in me. And I believe that, there's scripture, the whole earth is groaning for the sons of man to be awakened. And I believe that he is advancing his kingdom, and that he is working through guys like you, guys like me, through a lot of guys that we're connected with, to awaken man to become who we are intended to be.
Yeah, it's so good. That was way more and way better than I thought I was going to get an answer. And I love that because, there's quite a few people that listen to this podcast that aren't Christians, that don't have that perspective of faith. And so, first of all, I just think that's a wonderful articulation of both what God intended as well as what God is doing for us as men and as human beings. And I think that's something that people need to listen to and really need to pay attention to and take to heart, because it is life-changing. And there's obviously a lot more that goes into it than just that, but just that's wonderful. And something else, that it made me think of when you were talking about what you were talking about was, so I didn't come to faith until I was 28. Most people have heard the story. It was near broken marriage, almost going to get a divorce, led us into church. Somebody had been pushing and prodding at me to go. We finally accepted an invitation to go. And anyway, so it took about a year for that kind of to take root for us. And after about a year or so, I'd married my best friend, like our marriage is kind of getting back together. And then we started this young marrieds Bible study. And early on, we're talking about the roles of husbands and wives. And we go to Ephesians, right? And, and one of the worst things that a non-Christian or a ignorant Christian even can hear is when Paul gives the command for wives to submit to their husbands. And I was an ignorant Christian at the time. And I'm like, oh, right. Like, now we're in, like, baby, did you hear that?
I can buy into this.
It's like, first of all, I totally missed the passage right before that says I'm basically to die to myself in order to serve my wife. But I just heard and I stuck to that. And then today, when we talk about, just like the destruction of role and identity, and it's like, no way would a woman ever submit to a man. But what I learned as I went on and understanding what that meant was the only way, with first God at work, but beyond that, the only way that was ever going to happen in my relationship was going to be if I behaved as if the verse before that was true. Like, if I was not willing and desiring and continuing to act out this commitment to die to myself, imperfectly, definitely, but to die to myself every single day, to serve my wife, to love her unconditionally, to do whatever I could to be there for her, to support her, to understand that every single time that I needed to make a decision for as a leader in the home or in our family, that I was doing so understanding the weight by which I was making these decisions, that I had to earn her trust and I had to earn her respect. Then all of a sudden, this idea of submission was the result of her trusting in what I had lived out in my role as a husband first. And it was this redeeming idea. It was just this identity that had been restored that I had never seen before. So, you saying what you said just makes me think that there's just so many twisted perspectives on manhood today. And they happen in the church too, absolutely. But, the most broken one of all is ultimately never going to be corrected until people understand where we ultimately came from and what Christ did on our behalf. Because if that's not there, I know a lot of really good men that don't believe in Jesus, and I would never take anything away from the life that they're living and the good that they do and the human beings that they are. But there's just a piece that's always going to be missing, Yeah. So, okay. So you have this really like big perspective change in life. You're brought up, you grow up a certain way, you're living in a way that you definitely say not honoring to the Lord, but not something that you were probably proud of to that point. And so as you start to make shifts, where were some of the more challenging places that you found yourself in that made it hard for you to live out that new role that you felt you were called to?
Ironically, or not, maybe it was at the time, but in my mind now, I didn't find that like dying to myself and coming into full awareness of my sin was that hard. Like when I say that I accepted Christ, like it was kind of hook, line, and sinker, like the whole enchilada. Not the whole enchilada. I couldn't have handled all of his glory, right? Still can't. But understanding the depth at which he saved me, the casting my sins as far as the east is from the west, and how freeing that was.
Okay, wait, can I stop you there? So
yeah.
Why do you think that sunk in so well so quickly for you?
I think it was a work of the Holy Spirit. I think it wasn't, maybe I was confronted with my deep need, like the gaping hole that I had. And then his grace and mercy just so lovingly filled that, as we've experienced, those of us who have experienced that. I really don't know, but this might go a little bit different direction than you might think. The hardest thing for me was, I was a red-blooded American. I competed at a high level in rodeo. I qualified for the National Finals Rodeo in 2 events 21 years ago, and competed full-time for 5 years. And I didn't know how. The thing that I struggled with the most was giving up chewing, and that took me 5 or 6 years, 3 or 4 years. And I wasn't like just Copenhagen drooling out of my mouth all that. I couldn't chew Copenhagen. I was a big spit guy. I was like a red man guy. And I did it when I was bored. I just did it. I was riding horses 8 hours, 9 hours a day. But that was challenging. But the hardest thing for me was how to be like Jesus. What would Jesus do in every moment, including my competing? And I never really got to where I kind of am today, or I ended up getting to at the end of my career while I was in my prime. And I lost my edge in an effort to be, in an effort to be the kind of Christian that I thought I was supposed to be. I guess that's probably the best way I could say it. And it didn't mean that I didn't still win. It didn't mean that I still didn't compete at a high level, but I lost my edge a little bit, if I'm honest with myself. Now, did the Lord fill that void, and did I win more than I would have ever won? Probably so. But I know now that, even watching movies like For Love of the Game and understanding better, I've coached a lot in the last 15 years, my kids and different things, and understanding what it's like to play free. How important that is when we're competing, to literally not have any ties that bind, not have anything that you're kind of dragging along, or that you have one foot on the clutch or on the brake. And so for me, looking back now with a much different perspective, rearview mirror, that was the thing that I struggled with the most is, well, how to be a husband. Number one, how to be a husband, and how to serve and lead well, and what that looks like. And I'm just going to say it. Most of the Christian marriage counseling out there, like, I hate, and I've been through a lot of them, like the tapes and the live events and stuff. The best thing I ever heard was men have blue megaphones and blue hearing aids, and women have pink ones and pink hearing aids. And so when we're talking through a blue megaphone, and they're hearing it through a pink hearing aid. And most of the time, they don't hear it the way we say it, and vice versa. Like, of all the things I've gone through and read, that is like when I heard that, I almost fell over backwards in my chair. Right? I was like, preach. That is the truest thing I've ever heard. And it all makes sense now. Like, I'm going to be a good husband now, not that it fixed everything, but so like being a good husband was the hardest, and then learning how to compete. And, but it all comes back into identity. The reality was, as a believer, I was operating as a sinner saved by grace, not a saint who occasionally sins. And if you really chew on it, whether you're a follower of Christ or not, but there is it seems really small, nuanced difference, but it couldn't be any bigger. And for me, understanding that I really am a saint, that I screw up, but that's not who I am. That's not my identity. And I'm not perfect. But it changed everything for me. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that's good, man. Okay. So something in there that you said is an area that I have over and over again pursued, explored, and I just haven't been able to find anything really good. And it's this idea of winning as a Christian. And, again, there is tons of terrible information out there. There's a lot of people that abuse it, the prosperity gospel, and anybody that follows it, even a lot of these garbage coaches that are out there that claim to be Christians, that are all about God wants you to have all this stuff. And like, there's like an underlying truth to it, but it's not like this stuff specifically. It's God just wants you to have an abundance of joy, and however he lays it out for you, it's going to look different. So it's like, so that's all out there. But what I actually find more frustrating than anything, and it sounds actually like this is part of what you dealt with, was we don't find anybody, I don't personally find anybody that's really teaching us how to win well as Christians. It's like, we hear all about the grace of God, and it's like, I kind of take my hands off and God's going to work and I'm going to let him do his thing. But we seem to miss all of the scripture around, like Paul was like, the apostle Paul was like the grace of all grace, guys. And yet he talked so much about tension, pressing on, striving, and we haven't
run the race.
Yeah. And we haven't done a good job of really digging into that. And so I feel like there's a lot of good Christian men out there that are afraid to fight to win, because somehow that's going to make them less Christian, or it's going to cause them to fall into greed. And it's like, yes, maybe, but if we treated everything else that way, then we would never have sex with our wives, because, we would just fall into like sexual, lust and misconduct all the time. And so it's like, so have you done any more digging in that area since that time to kind of figure out how, like, why that happened to you the way that it did, or maybe like even overcorrecting now because you're successful in business now, which means you've had to learn how to fight to win? And so, like, how do you see that?
Well, I haven't arrived. Like, I think that I have perspective and victory. I think there's more levels that are available to me in this. But here's what I'll say. That I think is it's a epidemic in worship centers all across America. Because, and it's man's fault. It's our fault. This is my perspective. Okay. Because man abdicated their authority on earth all the way back in the garden. Okay. We still abdicate it today. And so then what happens is that women who are desiring leadership and the masculine and not toxic masculinity, a wonderful, beautiful masculine expression of the Father, of God, to be present in their home, to lead spiritually, to lead relationally, to lead from a provision and a protection standpoint, right? All the things, because there's a vacuum, there has been a vacuum there, all right? Because man continues, I have in various areas of my life that the Lord has exposed to me, abdicated, meaning we've turned over our responsibility to be man, to be little K king, submitted to the King of Kings, to be saint, to be heir, right? To protect and provide and show up, and also apologize and love well, right? All the things. that women come in there, and it's a beautiful thing. If you know guys that have been raised by single moms, my God, there's not a stronger type human on the earth than a mom who steps up to be both dad and mom, right? However, it has a negative consequence because then you end up with a lot of women wanting to raise good little boys, okay? And you see that so much in the church. And quite frankly, most, not all, but most worship center models in America are led by a very feminine leaning or leading group of elders, typically senior pastor, teacher, right? And so it's permeated the church, our faith, and it's indoctrinated and emasculated man. Okay. And so part of it for me was being able to see that in right perspective. I think that I see it much, much better according to the word of God than I ever have. Not that I see it perfectly, and to kind of be able to hold that in that light. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, say, what is my role then? How am I to operate? Because I got to tell you, if you're not careful, if you get in a feedback loop, you know this, if you get into a community, if you get into a body of people that have a similar belief, it's almost impossible to hold a belief that is contrary to that overarching, very, very subtle thing. But I actually believe that it's planted there by the enemy of our soul to be able to pull warriors and pull men that are called to lead, to show up, to be an authentic man, to either get them out of there and completely unplug from that, which creates a more of what we just said, the mom stepping into that role because she wants to drag her kids to church, and all honorable, well-intended things, right? But it all falls right back on man. And so I don't know. My answer is not in the context of competing. It's more in the context of life, but it bleeds over. And so for me, like, I'm more free now. If we've all been around guys that when you see them, like I see that in you and a little bit of time I spent with you, but you stand and you're solid, right? I believe that you know who you are, right? And you're good with it. And if you were to compete in that state, you're not competing for some type of performance identity that your ego's out there real sensitive. And if you don't perform well or you don't win, then your identity is loser, right? It's like, no. That's a trap, right? But we see that, especially high level, like they're just wrecked when they lose, right? And so it's hard. It's hard to put it all out there and strive in a good way, like want to win and then not. And it's a test of emotional intelligence and taking our thoughts captive. And it's an exercise in disciplining of our soul, our mind, our will, our emotions, all of those things. And it ain't easy. And right here in this office, about 2 months ago, I was on a Zoom call just like this with some executives. I'm on the executive team, was on the executive team. And I got wrapped around the axle. I was ready to take this laptop and throw it out the window into the lobby of the bank. Right. And so I can sit here and I can say all these things, but just know that, especially in this day and age, when everybody's at a sensitivity level, just walking around, I don't know about you, but we're so full of frustration often that it just doesn't take much. And the last 2 years has just been me getting to practice trying to get my peace back, like trying to steward my peace. And so that's how I would answer it. It's a big thing, but when we begin to see it, then we can begin to we can identify it and then take it for what it is, and then begin to hold it in the light, take those thoughts captive, maybe step back from that community or that thing for a time and press into the Lord directly, and then get back in community. But that's kind of the last 10 or 12 years exercise that I've been through.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really good. I mean, I think it's, through a lot of what you said, I mean, I just don't think that there's a lot of people that are modeling it well, which that creates massive problems. Again, just, picking on the church a little bit, because I guess we can, it's just not modeled there. But a big part of it is the failure of the man. It's because they don't participate well in church. Even when they go, they're not usually deeply invested. And so it is the women that are invested. It's the children that are invested. And so then the churches pivot towards that. And so, they're not being taught well. They're not continuing to be like pulled and dragged into those environments, being told that they have to, as much as we don't want to drop the law, sometimes we have to. And this is an area that, we definitely do. And so I think that's super important, and something that, I heard you allude to, a few different times in there. And then I think the other thing that you spoke to that's so important for us to think about. So, when you talk about like this sense of freedom, and it's just so freeing, it's crazy to me because once I really leaned into being a Christian in the business world, I began to have more freedom than I ever did, in the sense that if I believe that ultimately God's will is going to work itself out perfectly no matter what. And part of God's will, he's going to bring the people to me that are going to buy from me, the people to me that are going to reject me. Like, if it's all ultimately in his control, then I have the freedom to do what I want and say what I want whenever I want it. Like, I don't want to be an idiot about it. Like, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane without a parachute. But at the same time, it's like, I definitely still battle from time to time fear of losing or not being seen as, I want to be seen or whatever. Like, there's always that tension there. But ultimately, one of the things that I love the most about doing what I'm doing for myself is I just get to be me, and I get to let God work that all out. The clients that want to work with me, that do. When I got the more vocal that I get, and I ebb and flow through this, but the more vocal I get about my faith, I watch as people pull away and other people lean in. When I talk about politics or even my COVID experience, certain people pull away, certain people lean in. But it's like, this is just who I am. This is who God made me to be. And like, I can only win to the degree that God is going to allow anyway. So why don't I just go out there and let it fly and watch God work?
That's right.
But again, that's not even taught. It's like, when I don't know, it's just, there's so much brokenness in this area. And I wish that we would see, which is one of the reasons why, by the way, I love ISI, which Iron Sharpens Iron, is the mastermind that JD and I are in, and we're in different groups, but we're part of a much larger group of men. And what I love about that is here's a group of, even when we were in Tennessee, there was 100 guys all in the room together that were everything from, probably sub 6-figure earners all the way up to, guys that are like running $500 million companies. And everybody is trying to do the same thing, which is be the ultimate best version of themselves in the workplace, in the home, in the church. And again, they're not all nailing it in all areas. We're not nailing it in all areas. But I felt that energy of like, dude, we're done with mediocrity. It's not about consumption of all this stuff, but at the same time, I want to lean into everything that's available to me. I want to exercise that hunger and that desire that God has put inside of me. And I'm sick and tired of people telling me that, like, I can't or I shouldn't, because somehow that's like less godly, to do that. So I love that you said so much of that stuff.
Yeah. If I may,
go.
So I so resonate with Peter in the Bible, right? He was the only disciple that got out of the boat. and walked on water for a time until he got his eyes off Jesus. But he was also the guy that was just, he denied Christ, and he cut the soldier's ear off, and Jesus rebuked him, and Jesus is like gluing it back on the side of his head supernaturally, right? Just like Peter, like would you just, but I'm reminded that we need to have that released in us as men. We need to have that freedom that you're talking about, to be the guy that goes, and it gets harder as you get older. I mean, I've been working through this, like not wanting to fail. 8 years ago when we started our e-commerce business, I was just like, fail fast. Like, we've got to break a bunch of stuff. And then here now, I'm just like, we're launching a new business. It's a property management company and stuff. And it's like going good. Everybody loves it, but I'm not having a lot of clients, call the phone yet. And so we're figuring out the marketing, and we're figuring out our value proposition. Do we have the right product to market fit, or service offering to market fit, and all the things that we do when we start new stuff. And it's just like, I don't want to fail, I don't want to lose, but it's kind of like, who gives a damn? Who gives a rat's ass if I fail at this? Because guess what? God gave me a brain, and God gave me a work ethic, and I actually treat people pretty well, I hope. And I'm going to figure it out, right? By God's grace. And so like we need to be cutting off more ears, probably. And we need to be listening to the Holy Spirit, but we for sure need to be getting out of the boat. I mean, we for sure, as men, with all of success and all these labels, we need to be freed up, especially I think in this pandemic, the last couple of years, man, it's just like everything is constricting, shut down, suppress, stay home. We need to spread our wings. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's so good, man. I mean, so I talk to guys about freedom more than anything. I have a coaching academy called The Foundations to Freedom. And, the only way that I could teach it was if I lived it. And so I have gradually been moving more and more into this. And people are probably like rolling their eyes because I talk about it so much. But this year has been the most incredible year of my life. And it's not because I've made the most money, even though it's been a decent year financially. It's not because we went on any like magnificent vacation, though we've been a lot, some fun localish places. But this is the first year that I have called all my shots. And I say that in humility. I don't say that with arrogance. Like, I live under the authority of what God calls me to. I respect my wife and my kids, have my priorities in order for the most part. But like, I have averaged 30 hours of work a week this whole year by choice. And I play golf almost every Friday with the same group of guys that we have some fun and goof off and test my patience and will in golf. And, it's like, this is it. Like, I have crazy goals and ideas for what I want. Like, I'm 43. I have some really, really big visions for 50. And so that's all out there. And I'm striving and I'm working and I'm pushing, and we're together internally as a team. Shannon and I, who works with me, we're working on what 2022 is going to look like and how we're like, all that's there. But at the same time, I just want to live free. And what's been super cool is I hired her to come work for me in March of this year. And she helps with client engagement, a lot of operation stuff. She works with our vendors. She comes into the office a couple of days a week. But it's been super cool because I have been able to give that gift to her. She is a young new mom, and she works from home quite a bit. She comes into the office just a little bit here and there. And so she's getting it too. She's like, hey, I'm gonna cut out early and go to Disneyland for the day. And I'm like, go. Or, hey, we're gonna head out to the river for the week. Okay, go. Or, hey, what do we do about the week in between Christmas and New Year's? I'm like, you don't work. Like, we're good. And so I'm trying to like extend that gift to people around me. I'm trying to coach people to that gift. It's like, your ultimate like prescription or description of freedom will be different, but I just want people to experience it, because that's what we have. That's the ultimate gift that we can receive and give to other people, is this idea that, with all integrity and principle and value, it's like, I want to do what I want, when I want, with the people that I want. And so that's what it's all about. Right. And there's, there's give and take, and it's not always, totally ideal, but I love it. I love it. And so hearing you, talk about, this has been so much of your pursuit, is like, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're kindred souls, kindred spirits, I think.
No, it's so dope.
It's a beautiful age. You're at a beautiful age. We're at a beautiful age because there's so many, when you're in your 30s and 40s, like 30s, and then probably most guys into 45 or so, they're like locker room, measuring body parts and things. And it's just like, when you finally go through enough stuff, experience some loss, whether it's losses in business, financial losses, losing a parent like I have, losing an uncle who was like my best friend, who stood up for me in my wedding, like a second father. You realize, like, we're not getting out of here. It's cliche, but we're not getting out of here with any of this stuff. We ought to figure out how to enjoy it. And so, but we want to win, and we want to accumulate some things so that we can go where we want, when we want, with whom we want, whenever we want. I don't know that the accumulation of things, but gathering up some assets or gathering up some passive income, all the things, it's all of that is so that we can have autonomy and freedom. And I mean, that's how I'm wired. And I think most of us, if we're honest with ourselves and we get out of the pre-programmed doctrine, that we've been given most of our lives, that we would recognize that's all we really want,
Yep. Yeah. No, all that stuff is, they're just means to an end, right? It's like, they're just allowing us to do all the things that we've been created to do. It's right. Amazing. All right. So we're landing the plane there. I think that was so good. I think ultimately what I heard is go live as the free man that you were created to be. I love it, man. I appreciate you, JD. We had, 12, 15 minutes tops, in Nashville to chit chat. I can't wait. I know that we're going to get to do it again in March. And I'm so looking forward to that, but I loved this too. And I love that I got to know you better, which is super cool. It makes more sense of why we connected so well. I know that this is going to just so bless and encourage other men out there that are listening, or wives, which I have quite a few of those too. And I have one, but that are listening, that are listening, and they get to go share this with their husbands. And so I think that there was a lot of wisdom gleaned. And again, as I try to say, and I know JD, you would agree, it's like, we're not trying to tell people how to live their lives. We're trying to give people a picture of what life is possible for them by them creating, their version of it. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for being on. It's been awesome.
Yeah. I appreciate the time. Glad to get to know you better as well. And I look forward to the next time.
Yeah. There's going to be more for sure.
There's going to be more.
All right, guys, that wraps up another episode of Authentic Conversations. As always, if you have any feedback, I'll make sure to put contact information for JD in the show notes. You know where to find me if you need me. And in the meantime, be you, be happy, be authentic. Peace. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Authentic Conversations. If you are ready to live the life you've dreamed of, I'm here to help. Head to ryanjamesmiller.com/podcast to begin your journey. And if this episode impacted you in any way, pay it forward by sharing it with someone you know. I'm Ryan James Miller, and I'll see you next time on Authentic Conversations.